Late summer, late 1870s, southern Great Plains. One of the last regions where large bison herds still move freely. The herd advances without urgency, maintaining spacing that balances access to grass with protection from exposure. Rift, a mature cow with a torn left ear, occupies the inner lanes of the herd, where risk is lower and movement is more predictable. She feeds when the herd slows, lowering her head only after spacing stabilizes. When movement resumes, Rift lifts her head early and matches pace before pressure reaches her position. Calves drift near her flank and she does not adjust, relying on surrounding bodies to prevent separation. Water access follows familiar routes, and the herd approaches it as a unit. After drinking, Rift closes distance again, returning to the interior spacing she prefers. As evening settles, the herd compresses further, reducing open sightlines. Rift rests within the group, standing and dozing in short cycles as others do. Morning movement follows the same pattern, with the herd advancing only after feeding slows across the interior. Rift adjusts her pace by matching those ahead of her, avoiding the need for sudden movement. The herd's direction changes gradually, guided by terrain rather than urgency. Rift feeds again once spacing settles, returning to grass already compressed by earlier passage. Dust remains low and consistent, disturbed only by steady hooves and shifting weight. At midday, movement pauses without command as feeding resumes across the herd. Rift remains within the same cluster, maintaining proximity to familiar bodies. When the wind shifts, the herd's spacing tightens slightly, then stabilizes. Late afternoon brings another gradual advance, paced evenly across the interior. Rift ends the day where she began, inside the herd, with movement, feeding, and rest following an unchanged sequence. The herd resumes movement after rest without hesitation, continuing along familiar ground. Rift follows the same internal paths through the herd, choosing routes shaped by habit rather than observation. Spacing remains consistent, wide enough for feeding, but narrow enough to limit exposure. The herd's pace slows again as grass thickens and feeding resumes without disruption. Rift feeds without lifting her head often, trusting the herd to signal when movement is required. Calves remain interspersed throughout the interior, rarely drawing attention. The wind carries only familiar scents, grass, dust, and animals already known. As daylight fades, the herd compresses again, preparing for rest. Rift settles into position behind heavier animals, ending the day with limited sight lines. Nothing in the day requires adjustment, and the herd's pattern holds. The herd advances again in the morning, repeating the same sequence of feeding, movement, and rest. Rift remains within the interior, following patterns that have not yet failed her. The herd crosses shallow grooves cut straight into the ground, and movement slows slightly as footing changes. Rift steps across the hardened lines without stopping, adjusting her stride to the altered surface. Spacing tightens briefly, then returns as the herd clears the irregular ground. Feeding resumes, but pauses between head movements lengthen. A faint smell unfamiliar to the herd drifts across the plains and dissipates. Rift remains inside the group, responding only by maintaining closer proximity to heavier animals. Movement resumes sooner than usual, shortening the feeding window. The herd continues forward, altered but intact. The next day begins without clear markers, but movement starts earlier than before. Rift feeds briefly, lifting her head sooner and matching the herd's pace without delay. Spacing across the interior remains functional, but distances close more often than they reopen. A sharp sound carries across the plains. Brief and clean, unlike wind or thunder. The herd pauses, then continues, movement resuming without scattering. Rift closes distance with the animals ahead of her, reducing the space she must monitor. Feeding shortens again, replaced by steady movement across open ground. Birds lift suddenly at the edges of the herd and do not settle nearby. Rift remains within the interior but changes position more often than before. By evening, the herd compresses earlier, resting with less dispersion than usual. At first light, the herd moves again, but the outer ranks are thinner than before. Rift remains buffered inside the group, though fewer bodies now absorb movement ahead of her. As the day progresses, gaps appear where animals once held position. Rift adjusts her path to avoid the openings, shifting toward denser clusters. No calls follow the missing animals, and no movement returns to fill the space. Feeding becomes uneven, with some animals grazing while others continue moving. The herd no longer advances as a single mass, but in loosely connected bands. Rift remains with the heaviest cluster available, even as its size diminishes. By evening, the usual compression leaves wider margins than before. The land feels larger, not because it has changed, but because fewer bodies occupy it. The group moves through ground Rift has crossed before, but fewer animals accompany her. Spacing widens as movement continues, creating longer sight lines in every direction. A calf that had moved near Rift is no longer present. Rift does not search or call, continuing forward with the remaining animals. Feeding shortens again, replaced by longer stretches of movement. At rest, Rift stands longer before settling, shifting position more frequently. Night passes with fewer bodies nearby, and sound travels farther than before. The group changes direction more often, adjusting without clear pattern. Rift remains with the group, but the herd she learned no longer exists. Movement continues, but routes that once led to density now lead into open ground. The air changes downwind, carrying a dense scent that does not disperse as the others have. Movement slows, then redirects, without the group needing to close distance or stop. The scent intensifies as they travel, layered and recent. They do not approach the source, choosing distance over familiarity. Hours pass in sustained movement without feeding. A sharp crack sounds closer than before, and the group breaks into uneven motion. Rift runs longer than she would choose, breathing heavy as distance stretches behind her. When they stop, no answering movement or sound follows. They wait, then continue, without regaining direction or numbers. The herd Rift depended on no longer exists. Movement resumes without reference to former routes, guided instead by open ground and visibility. Spacing increases as the group moves, leaving more distance between bodies than before. Rift keeps her head raised longer while feeding, interrupting grazing more frequently. Direction changes occur without pause, favoring routes that allow faster movement if needed. Open basins are crossed quickly, without stopping to feed. Rest comes later in the day and lasts for shorter intervals. At night, Rift positions herself with clear space behind her rather than dense cover. Sound carries farther now, reaching the group before it fades. Feeding becomes secondary to movement, adjusted repeatedly throughout the day. Rift follows these changes without hesitation, adapting as conditions demand. Days pass without major interruption, but the pattern no longer resembles what came before. Movement and feeding alternate unevenly, without the predictable rhythm the herd once maintained. Rift no longer relies on neighboring bodies to limit her exposure. The land provides grass, but not the protection that once came with numbers. Rest occurs in shorter intervals, interrupted by frequent repositioning. Night passes quietly, without the muffling effect of a large herd. Morning brings movement again, chosen early and without delay. Rift maintains awareness through motion rather than stillness. Nothing signals an end to the conditions that reshaped her behavior. The land remains, but it no longer supports what it once held. Rift continues moving with the same small group, their numbers unchanged. Feeding occurs where it can, limited by how long the group remains in one place. Rift chooses positions that leave open ground ahead rather than bodies to follow. The land offers grass but little cover, requiring constant adjustment. Rest comes in short intervals, ended before stillness settles. Night passes without compression, leaving space between each animal. Morning movement begins early, without waiting for prolonged feeding. Rift maintains a steady pace, conserving energy without stopping. No sound or scent suggests a return to former density. Life continues within limits that no longer widen. Rift grazes when movement slows, taking what time the group allows. Water is reached without ceremony, approached and left with little pause. The group rests without forming the dense clusters that once defined the herd. Rift remains alert longer than she rests, adjusting position even while stationary. Night brings no change, only reduced visibility. Morning movement begins again, unchanged from the day before. Rift follows the group's pace, conserving energy where she can. Nothing in the environment signals reversal or recovery. The land continues to support her movement, but little more. Rift lives on, moving forward inside a world that has narrowed and holds.